The footage is 40 seconds long. It was filmed on a phone at the wrong angle by a man who knew exactly when to start recording and exactly when to stop. It begins with a slap. It ends before the truth. In the space between those two cuts, a woman lies on a marble floor with a bullet in her shoulder and the man who saved her life on his knees beside her, pressing his folded jacket to the wound, his silver cufflinks turning red, his face wet in a way no one in his world has ever seen it. She is 62 years old. Her name is Mafia Boateng. She is the mother of one of the most powerful black women in London. And the man kneeling over her, the man whose hand she is holding with the last of her strength, is Taemin Park, the most feared man in Korean organized crime. The phone does not film the kneeling. The phone films the slap. By morning, the slap is everywhere. By morning, the world has decided what it saw. By morning, 3,000 miles away in a quiet London penthouse, Imani Boateng is sitting on the edge of her bed in a silk robe, watching the clip for the 4th time, and her hands are not shaking. They are the stillest they have ever been. She does not cry. She does not call anyone. She does not break. She buttons her coat. She picks up her phone and she calls Kojo Asante, the man who has been her head of security since she was 26 years old, the man who grew up next door to her in South London, the man who has never once said the thing he has always felt, and she says only 4 words. Get the plane ready. Kojo says only 1 word back. Yes. By the time the sun comes up over the Thames, Imani Boateng is in the air over the Atlantic, and somewhere beneath her, in a private hospital outside Seoul, her mother is opening her eyes for the first time in 6 hours and asking, in a voice nearly too quiet to hear, whether the man who saved her is still alive. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories Vault. If you are new here, this is the channel where the love stories no one expected stay with you long after the video ends. If you have ever believed that the most extraordinary love is the kind that arrives through circumstance no one would have chosen, tap subscribe, because tonight's story is for you. Stay close. The truth of this one does not arrive the way you think it will, and you do not want to miss the moment it does. Now, let me take you back to Seoul. Let me take you back to the ballroom. Let me take you back to the 3 minutes before the phone began to record. The ballroom was full. 300 guests. A charity gala for a foundation Mama Ya had chaired for 9 years. She wore deep blue Ghanaian fabric, gold thread woven through the hem, a head wrap that caught the chandelier light when she moved. She was the kind of woman a room organized itself around. She had not asked for that. She had simply been alive for 62 years in a particular way, and rooms had learned. Taemin Park was across the floor. He had not wanted to be there. He had come because his mother, Madam Sun Hee Park, had asked him to, and his mother did not ask for things twice. He stood near a marble pillar with a glass of water in his hand, his silver cufflinks catching the light, his eyes moving across the room the way they always moved, taking inventory, marking exits, marking faces, marking the small wrong things that other people did not see. He saw Mama Ya first because she was the only person in the room who was not performing. She was talking to a young woman with a clipboard. She was laughing at something the young woman had said. The laugh was real. Taemin Park had not heard a real laugh in a room like that in 15 years. He looked at her for 2 seconds longer than he meant to. He looked away. Mama Ya saw him a moment later. She did not laugh anymore. She watched him. She watched the way his hands stayed unnaturally still around the water glass. She watched the way his eyes had moved across the room the way her late husband's eyes used to move across rooms, scanning for the thing that did not belong. She watched him, and something in her chest did a small thing she had not felt in a long time. Not attraction. She was 62 years old and she was not foolish. Recognition. The recognition of a man carrying weight the way a man she had once loved had carried weight. She made a note of him. She would tell Imani. Imani had been alone too long, and Mama Ya was running out of time to fix it. She did not know the man's name yet. She would not get the chance to ask. 3 minutes later, the man with the gun stepped through the side door. He was Victor Cho's man. Victor Cho had been waiting 2 years for a public room and a clean shot. He had paid for the angle. He had paid for the phone. He had paid for the cut. He had not paid for what happened next because what happened next was not in any of his calculations. Mama Ya Boateng saw the gun before Taemin did. She was 62. She had a heart condition no one knew about. She had 18 months left and she knew it, and she had been carrying that knowledge for 9 weeks. She had spent those 9 weeks deciding what to do with the time. And in the half-second between seeing the gun and the gun seeing Tae-min, she made the last quick decision of her active life. She stepped into the path. She did not run. She walked because running would have telegraphed it. She walked the way a woman walks who has decided that the man across the room is going to live tonight. The first shot went into her shoulder. Tae-min Park moved faster than anyone in the room had ever seen him move. He hit her across the face hard enough to send her down behind the pillar half a second before the second shot would have taken her in the chest. The second shot took the marble. The third shot went into the ceiling because Ji-won Park had already crossed the floor and put the shooter on the ground. Mama Ya was alive. The phone, in the hand of a waiter who had been paid $40,000 to film exactly this, started recording the moment the slap landed and stopped recording the moment Tae-min Park went to his knees. In the 11 minutes before the medics arrived, Tae-min knelt on the marble floor with his folded jacket pressed to her shoulder and he wept, quietly, the way a man weeps when he has not wept in 29 years. Mama Ya's hand found his hand. She held it. She said one sentence to him in English slowly, because her breath was thin. Take care of her when I am gone. She has been alone for too long. Tae-min Park, who did not know yet who her was, nodded. And by morning, the world had decided what it had seen. Amani Boateng landed in Seoul at 4 in the afternoon, and by 6 o'clock she was standing in the courtyard of a private compound 30 kilometers outside the city with Kojo Asanti half a step behind her, and the air so still she could hear the hinges of the gate as it closed behind them. She had rehearsed what she was going to say to him on the plane. She had rehearsed it 11 times. She had it down to 43 words, cold, precise, the kind of sentence that did not leave a room undamaged. She did not get to use it. He was already in the courtyard when she walked in. He had been told she was coming. He had not made her wait. He stood at the edge of the stone path with his hands at his sides, in a charcoal suit, his silver cufflinks catching the late light, and he looked at her and he did not look away. She stopped walking. She had expected a man behind a desk. She had expected guards. She had expected the architecture of power, designed to make her smaller before she opened her mouth. She had expected, in short, the version of this man the internet had given her, which was a man who needed to be reduced. She had not expected him to be standing in the open with his hands at his sides like a man waiting to be hit. She walked the rest of the way to him. She stopped 2 meters away. She said all 43 words. Her voice did not rise. She did not need it to. She told him what kind of man he was. She told him what she was going to do to him. She told him that her mother had raised her better than to share air with men like him, and that the only reason she was sharing air with him now was so that she could be sure, when she destroyed him, that she had looked him in the face first. He listened to every word. When she was finished, the silence in the courtyard was the loudest thing she had ever heard. He looked at her, not at her body, not at her position, at her. The way a man looks at someone he has just realized he is going to remember for the rest of his life. He did not know it yet. She did not know it yet. But the look lasted 1 second longer than it should have, and in that second something in the courtyard shifted that neither of them was going to be able to undo. He spoke. Your mother is safe. She is being protected. You are welcome to leave or to stay. The choice is yours. That was all he said. She did not leave. She told herself that night, in the room he had given her in the east wing of the compound, that she had stayed because leaving without her mother was unthinkable, and she could not yet move her mother, and so staying was logistics. She told herself this while she sat on the edge of a bed in a room with a window that faced a quiet garden, and she pressed her palms flat against the bedspread to keep her hands from doing the thing they had started, very faintly, to do. 3 weeks. That is how long she stayed in the compound before the file appeared on the desk that should have been locked. 3 weeks is a long time to live in a man's house and refuse to know him. She tried. She gave it everything. She kept her door closed. She took her meals alone. She spoke to him only when she had to, and when she did, she kept her voice level and her eyes on the table. He did not push. He gave her access to everything. The books, the grounds, the kitchen, the library, the car if she wanted it. He gave her a guard who answered to her, not to him. He gave her a phone that was not monitored. He gave her, in short, every piece of evidence he could give her that she was not a prisoner, and he never once asked her to acknowledge any of it. She acknowledged none of it, but she noticed. On the second morning, she had taken her tea with too much sugar by mistake, the way she did when she was tired. On the third morning, the tea arrived from the kitchen with the proportions exactly right. She had not asked. No one had asked her. She drank the tea and she did not say thank you, because to say thank you would have been to admit that she had been seen, and she was not ready to be seen. On the 5th day, she had been reading a book in the library, and she had left it face down on the windowsill when she went to take a call. When she came back, the book was still face down on the windowsill, exactly where she had left it, but a thin silk ribbon had been placed inside it to mark her page. She had not asked for that either. On the 8th day, she had stayed too long in a meeting with him about her mother's medical care, and her shoulders had dropped half an inch because she was tired, and he had ended the meeting 1 minute later without explaining why. She noticed all of it. She did not let him know she had noticed. But Ji-won Park noticed her noticing. Ji-won Park, who had been watching his older brother run an empire and not a life for the last 15 years, sat in the corner of every meeting with his battered notebook resting against his knee, and he watched Imani Boateng watch his brother. And he watched his brother forget, 3 or 4 times a day, what he had been about to say because she had walked into the room. Ji-won wrote nothing down about it. Some things did not need to be written down. Some things you simply watched and waited and let happen. On the night of the 17th day, Imani could not sleep. She got up at 2 in the morning and she walked through the dark compound in bare feet, and she ended up in the kitchen, and Taemin Park was already there. He was making tea. He looked up when she came in. He did not seem surprised. He did not say anything. He poured a second cup. He set it on the counter on the side closest to her. He went back to his own cup. He did not look at her again. She stood at the counter. She did not pick up the tea. She watched his hands. He was doing nothing with them. They were resting on the counter on either side of his cup, completely still, and the silver of his cufflinks caught the under-cabinet light, and she realized, watching his hands, that she had spent 3 weeks watching this man's hands and she did not know when she had started. She picked up the tea. She drank it. He did not speak. She did not speak. They stood in his kitchen at 2 in the morning and they drank tea together in a silence so full it was almost a third person in the room. When she finished her cup, she set it down. He did not look up. She walked back through the dark compound to her room, and she got into bed, and her hands, which had been still for 3 years since the night Marcus left the voice note, were trembling so hard she had to press them flat against the sheet to make them stop. She did not sleep that night. Neither did he. The file was on the desk on the morning of the 22nd day. She had walked into his study to leave a message for him about her mother's discharge papers. The desk was unattended. The file was unmarked. It was not in the drawer. It was on the surface at an angle that made her think, for a moment, that it had been left there by someone who had been called away in a hurry, and only later, much later, did she begin to wonder whether it had been left there by someone who had been waiting 3 weeks for her to walk in alone. She opened the file. There was a flash drive inside. She took the flash drive to her room. She closed the door. She sat at the desk. She put the flash drive into her laptop. She clicked on the only file it contained. 6 minutes of footage, unedited, time-stamped, from a security camera mounted high in the corner of the ballroom. She watched it. She watched her mother see the gun. She watched her mother step into the path. She watched the first shot hit her mother's shoulder. She watched Taemin Park move across that ballroom faster than she had ever seen a man move, and she watched him hit her mother across the face hard enough to send her down behind the pillar a half second before the second bullet would have taken her in the chest. She watched him kneel. She watched him press his folded jacket to the wound. She watched her mother's hand find his hand. She watched the most feared man in Korean organized crime weep, quietly, on a marble floor with another woman's blood on his cufflinks, while the woman whispered something to him that the camera was too far away to catch. The file ran out. Imani Boateng sat in front of her laptop in a quiet room in a man's compound, and she did not move for a long time. Then she stood up. She walked out of the room. She walked through the compound. She did not stop to put on shoes. She walked out into the garden, where it had begun to rain, the kind of soft soul rain that does not announce itself. He was already there. He was standing at the far end of the stone path, in his shirt sleeves, no jacket, the rain darkening the white cotton across his shoulders. He was not looking at her. He was looking at a low wall covered in moss. He had the look of a man who had been standing there for a long time, and who knew, without being told, that she was coming. She walked the length of the path. She stopped 3 steps from him. He did not turn. The rain was not loud. It was the kind of rain that made a sound only when it landed on leaves. She listened to it land on the leaves. She listened to her own breath. She listened to the silence around her own breath, and she realized that for the first time in 3 years, She was standing inside a silence that did not feel like the absence of someone who had left her. It felt like the presence of someone who had not. She did not say anything. He did not say anything. They stood in the rain 3 steps apart, for a long time. Once she lifted her hand. She did not finish lifting it. She let it fall back to her side. Once he turned his face slightly toward her, just enough that she could see the line of his jaw, the silver at his temples, the wet shoulder of his shirt, and then he turned his face back to the wall, because looking at her would have been more than either of them could carry in that exact minute. The rain kept falling. Pause the video here for just a moment. If you have made it this far, if you are feeling what this story is doing to you, this is the moment to do 2 small things. Tap subscribe because we are not finished yet, and what comes next is the part of the story that does not let go. And if there is someone in your life who lives for stories where love finds its way through impossible circumstances, a sister, a best friend, a partner, the woman who has been waiting to feel something true, send this video to her now. She will know why you sent it. Thank you for staying with us. The truth of these 2 has only just begun to land. Stay close. Her phone rang in the garden. It was the hospital. Her mother had been cleared. Mama Ya was awake, alert, eating broth, asking for her grandchildren who did not yet exist. She was being moved within the hour to a quiet house outside the city, fully staffed, fully secured, where she could finish her recovery in peace. The call lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, Amani lowered the phone and she looked at Taemin Park, who had not moved, and she said, quietly, the first words she had said to him in 2 days. She is going to be all right. He nodded once. She wanted to say more. She wanted to say everything. She wanted to ask him why he had not told her, why he had let her say what she had said, why he had carried what he had carried, why he had pressed his jacket to her mother's shoulder and wept on a marble floor and never once defended himself. She wanted to ask him, most of all, whether the way he had looked at her in the kitchen at 2 in the morning had meant what she now understood it had meant. She did not ask. She told herself there was time. The phone in the safe house went dead 11 minutes later. It was not a malfunction. It was a man named Victor Cho cutting a line, and behind that line, in a quiet house outside the city, 3 guards were already on the floor and Mama Ya Boteng was already in the back of a black car heading north. The encrypted message arrived on Taemin's tablet at 22 minutes past 9. A single photograph. Mama Ya, alive, in a chair, unharmed, but with Victor Cho's hand resting on her shoulder. A meeting place. A choice. Amani trades herself or Taemin trades himself, but only one of them walks out and the other one watches Mama Ya die. Taemin read the message. He put the tablet face down on the table. He stood up. He walked out of the room. Amani did not see the message. He did not show her. He went to his study. He sat at his desk. He wrote a note on a small folded square of paper, for words long. He put the note on the kitchen counter on the side closest to where she would stand if she came to make tea at 2 in the morning. He did not say goodbye to her because saying goodbye would have required him to look at her, and if he looked at her he would not go. He told Ji-won. Ji-won did not argue. Ji-won had known his brother for 34 years, and he knew, the moment Taemin walked into the operations room with his cufflinks already off and his hands gone unnaturally still, that this was not a decision being made in front of him. This was a decision that had already been made. Ji-won said only one thing. She is going to be alone when she finds out. Taemin did not answer for a long time. Then he said quietly the first thing he had said about her out loud. Tell her she has not been alone since the moment she walked into the courtyard. He left the compound at 23 minutes past 10. Imani found the note at 6 in the morning. She had come down to the kitchen because she had not slept, because she had been thinking all night about the rain in the garden, about the way his shoulder had been wet through his shirt, about the way she had almost reached for him and decided she had time. She had come down to make tea. She had come down to think. She saw the note before she saw the tablet. The note said in his hand, for words, Imani, thank you for staying. She read it twice. She picked up the tablet that had been placed beside it. She unlocked it with the code G1 had left on the counter underneath. She read the message. She saw the photograph. She understood in the time it took to draw one breath exactly what he had done. She did not cry. She was Imani Boteng. She had built an empire on the ashes of a voice note, and she had not cried then either. She had buttoned her coat then. She buttoned her coat now. She walked into the operations room. G1 was already there. Kojo was already there. 6 of Taemin's senior people were already there, and not one of them had a plan because Taemin Park had not given them one. She gave them one. She had been quietly funding a forensic financial team for 3 years. She had not known, at the time, why she was doing it. The work had begun as research for an unrelated acquisition, and then it had kept going because something in the patterns had not let her stop. The team had mapped every offshore account connected to a man named Victor Cho. They had mapped his shell companies. They had mapped his laundering routes. They had mapped his protected accounts in 7 jurisdictions. She had not connected the name to anything in her life, because the name had not yet meant anything to her. She had simply followed the money, because following money was what she was good at. She had the file. She had had the file for 2 years. She did not bring a gun to Victor Cho's compound. She brought paperwork. She brought Kojo. She brought 3 lawyers from a sole firm she had retained on the flight in. She brought a recording device she did not bother to hide. She brought a board resolution from Boteng Holdings, signed in transit, authorizing the immediate transfer of intelligence to 7 international financial regulators and 3 governments. She brought the architecture of his shadow empire mapped to the dollar. She walked into his compound at 8 in the morning. He had been expecting Taemin. Taemin was already there. In the next room, alive, restrained, watching through a one-way mirror. Cho had wanted him to watch. Cho had wanted Taemin to watch what came next. Cho had not expected what came next to be a black British woman in a navy blazer and an afro puff and a scarred left hand, walking into his office without raising her voice. She did not raise her voice. She set the file on his desk. She opened the file to the first page. She told him what was in the file. She told him what she was going to do with the file in 6 minutes if her mother and the man in the next room did not walk out the door. She gave him 6 minutes. He decided in 4. Taemin Park watched, through the one-way mirror, as the woman he had been planning to die for took apart the empire of the man who had been planning to kill him without raising her voice once. He watched her hand rest on the file as Cho signed. He watched her eyes stay completely steady. He watched the small scar on her left knuckles catch the office light when she lifted her hand to turn the page. He did not say anything when they brought him into the room. She did not look at him. She did not need to. She looked at Cho until Cho was finished signing. Then she folded the papers. Then she put them in a leather portfolio. Then she stood up. She turned. She looked at Taemin. The look held 1 second longer than it needed to. She said quietly 3 words. Let's go home. The hospital room was small and quiet and full of late afternoon light. Mama Ya Boteng was propped on 3 pillows. She had a cup of tea on a tray over her lap. She had a bandage on her shoulder under her hospital gown. She had her hair wrapped in a soft gold cloth, and her eyes were the steady eyes of a woman who had survived something on purpose. Imani sat on her left. Taemin sat on her right. He had not yet taken Imani's hand. He was waiting. He had been waiting for 3 weeks, and he could wait another hour and another and as long as he needed to. Mama Ya looked at her daughter for a long time. Then she told her. She told her about the heart. She told her about the 18 months. She told her about the 9 weeks she had been carrying the knowledge alone. She told her she was sorry she had not said sooner, and that she had been waiting for a room where she could say it and know her daughter would not be alone when she heard it. She told her about the ballroom. She told her about the way Taemin Park had been standing near a marble pillar with a glass of water in his hand, and the way his hands had been unnaturally still, and the way she had recognized something in him in the 3 seconds before the gun. Then she told her what she had whispered to him on the marble floor after the slap. Take care of her when I am gone. She has been alone for too long. Imani looked at Taemin. Taemin looked at his hands. Then he looked at her. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would have been bigger than the room they were already in. Mama Ya reached for her daughter's hand. She squeezed it once. Then she reached for Taemin's hand. She placed her daughter's hand inside his. She nodded, the smallest nod. A mother handing something over that she had been carrying alone for 9 weeks. And she closed her eyes, and she rested. The rooftop was on the east side of Seoul. It was small. It was high. It was the rooftop of a building Taemin had owned for 11 years and had never once gone to the top of, because there had been no one to take. It was sunrise. There was a low table. There was a small pot of tea. There were 2 cups. There was a quiet that was not the absence of anyone. It was the presence of a city waking up under a pale gold sky, and the presence of 2 people who had stopped running, finally, in opposite directions. She sat down on one side of the table. He sat down on the other. The tea steamed between them. The cups were warm. Their hands rested near each other on the surface of the table, not touching, the way her hand had rested near his at the kitchen counter at 2 in the morning, the night neither of them had slept. She reached first. His hand turned, palm up, and waited. Her hand settled into his. His fingers closed around hers slowly, the way a man closes a book he is going to read again, and he held her hand on the table in the gold light of a soul sunrise, and he said her name. Once, just her name. She said his. The tea steamed. The city woke. The scar on her left knuckles caught the sun. The silver of his cufflinks caught the sun. Their hands stayed exactly where they were. If the story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone, of a moment, of the quiet way the right kind of love announces itself when you are not looking for it, tell us in the comments. Tell us which moment between Imani and Taemin stayed with you most. Tell us who you thought of while you watched. The comments are where the story keeps living, and we read every single one. This is Afro-Korean Love Stories Vault. Love, the real kind, the kind that survives everything, is always worth the wait. We will see you in the next one.